So we are moving on to our next form, which is the customer form. And we are going to include a little additional validation using the pattern attribute. And we're going to be creating something called a regular expression. Regular expressions are used in a wide variety of programming languages. They can be very simple or they can be really complicated. We are focusing on simple. This is a relatively new feature in HTML. It is not currently supported by all of the browsers. So just be aware of that. As time progresses, it will be fully supported. And it is a nice feature. It takes some of the burden of validation off of the server and client scripts. So the way you add the attribute is you add this to your input tag, and the attribute is pattern equals, and then in double quotes you have your regular expression. So if you want to validate a single number, in brackets you put 0 through 9. And that assumes only one digit. If you want more than one digit, in brackets you still do 0 through 9, but right after the brackets you have curly braces, and inside those curly braces you indicate the number of digits. If you're validating text, in the brackets you either have lowercase a to z or uppercase a to z, depending on if you want them to key in lower or uppercase. This also assumes one letter. So if you want to enter more than one, you have to tell it how many in curly braces. There are a lot of other regular expressions you can use. This additional example is looking for a web address and ensuring that it begins with HTTP or HTTPS. So if you want more information on this, you can use the link and go to W3 Schools. But for now, we are trying to keep it very easy and simple. And I'm going to have you guys download customerform.html to your Lesson 8 folder. And then you're going to be downloading Running Club to your Lesson 8 media folder. So you're just going to right click, save link as, and then you need to navigate to Lesson 8. And you can see I've already done this, so I'm going to not do it again. And then for Running Club, it's the same thing, right click, you're gonna save as, and make sure you get Running Club in your Lesson 8 media folder. Your next step is going to be to open up that customer form for editing. And the good news is I did the internal style sheet for you, so you do not have to do the internal style sheet. What you're going to be focusing on is creating the actual form itself. So if you open it up in the web browser, this is all you're going to see. And if you are looking at the code, it's going to look something like this. So you can see I've got the internal style sheet. And we are importing a font from Google. Nixie 1 is what it's called. And so we've got some body formatting. That's where we're putting in the background image. The form is going to be the container. This is a flex box layout. So the form is the container or the parent. And we're using a column layout on this. And then you can see we've got just kind of basic H1 formatting. Nothing really new in there. For the legend, this is the text that's going to display at the top of the various groups. We are making it a little larger. We're going to boldface, putting in a little padding above and below. We have the margin, a left margin of 10, so we're going to have it in a little bit from the left margin, but it's pretty basic formatting for that legend text. For labels, so this is the text that you're going to see in the form itself next to the areas where you have to enter data. So for the labels, we did specify a width of 150. And that is so that we can get them to line up correctly. Okay? If you don't put the labels in a set width, they're going to be kind of all over the place. So we set the width at 150. We have a float left, and that allows the form element to display right next to the label. And we did put a little padding on the right side of the label. That puts a little space between the form element and the label itself. We are bold facing. That's what font weight 900 does. Font size is a little bit larger than the default. And we're going to vertically align these. Field set. So this is identifying the different groups in the form. You'll notice we have flex set to 1. So this is a child or an item, depending on how you want to look at it. So it's a child of the parent container, which is form, or if you're looking at the parent as a container, this is an item within the form. I did specify a maximum width for the field set. And you can see we've got a bottom margin, we've got some padding, and we have a width set to 60% of the entire page. And just so happens that if you noticed up here, we do have a width set on H1 as well. As far as the classes below field set, we have a class for input buttons. We have a class for the form entry areas. We have a separate class that we're calling money. This is going to be used down in the payment section. So if we look over at the codes that you need to enter, you'll see where those classes are used. And it's just to ensure very consistent formatting in the entry areas. We're also using them in the labels. Okay, and the input button is obviously going to be used for the buttons. Then we come down here, we have our form tag, and the ID is register. I should probably also set a name for register, but it's fine just to leave ID. Action, we are going to be submitting this to the form processing script. We just used that script in the previous form. So it's basically designed to read the name value pairs and display them back. Again, we're using the method of get. So when we submit, we're going to see all of the data up in the address bar. So what you're going to be doing in between the opening and the closing form is you're going to be adding the field sets and all of the form elements. And that is what all of this code is showing. So we have 3 separate field set sections. So we basically have 3 children for our parent container. And then at the bottom, we have some buttons identified. Okay, and if you take a quick look, you can see the class is form entry. And that has been applied to all of the form entry areas so that they are kind of a consistent width, consistent font, consistent style. For a few of them that we didn't want quite so wide, we could override the size. But in this instance, we're just going to keep them all the same size. And then when we're coming down here into the billing, you'll notice that we have a text area. We're also using the form entry class, but the text area actually needs to be a little bit bigger, okay, because this is for like a comment box. We're using it for address information, but you typically have multiple lines in these. So we did specify a width and a height. And then you can kind of come down here. You can see that we've used form entry for the other ones as well. And then we get down here for the money. And the form entry didn't work very well. So what we've done is we have added a class of money. And the money class has a little different formatting. So if we come over here and we look, you can see that the money class font size of 12, color of black. The width is what is really different because it's longer. Okay, so here we had a width of 100, here it's 275. So you can see the width is quite a bit longer in our money class. And basically we had to have a longer width because of the instructions that we're using. 3 digits on back of card takes up quite a bit of space. So we needed to have a little longer entry area for that. So this is basically what you're going to be keying in. And then when you are done keying all of that in, you're going to save your changes and you're going to view the form offline. Okay, so the form is going to look something like this when you're all done. Okay. And you'll notice a couple things when you view this in different web browsers. They do not display dates the same. Also, for spin arrows like we have in shoe size, some of them don't show the spin arrows at all, and other ones do show them. Okay, so how this looks and how it operates is going to vary among the browsers. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what all of this looks like after you key it in. Okay, so the top part of this was given to you. So what you ended up keying in started here with the first field set, which is the child element. And here you can see, basically it's, as I just told you, we're using placeholders, not values. So there's not default values, it's just kind of instructions. We are using the data type here. We're using the email type. We're using the URL type. We're using the telephone type. And we're using the number. So these are all new in HTML5. You'll also notice that most of these are required. And we put autofocus on the first one. So that's where the insertion mark should be when the form first displays. Most of these, we have placeholders, basically showing an example of the formatting or the way they're supposed to key things in. For the number, okay, and this is going on a shoes field where they have to indicate their shoe size. I'm assuming that the shoe size, the lowest is going to be a 5. I set the maximum shoe size to 18, although I highly doubt anybody's going to have a foot size of 18. And then the step I set at 0.5 because people do have shoes in half sizes. Okay. And then you'll see I overrode the width on this because the default width was way too big. Okay. So I overrode the width, made it, a little less wide. For the skill level, the type is range, and that's going to give us a slider. And so you can set a minimum and a maximum on that. The default is a 0, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because the minimum is a 1. So you may want to set that to 1. Totally up to you. So just to see how this works, I am going to pull this up. Let me see if I have it. All right, so first name only, you'll notice that the insertion mark is there. And I'm just pressing tab. Now, the Chrome browser allows you to key in digits like this, or you can use spin arrows, or you can actually click on the list arrow and pick the date. So it's actually pretty flexible. And any field that's required, you will see a little tip that says, please fill out this field. So this is actually a pretty good browser as far as HTML5 forms go. And if you don't see the tip asking you to fill it out, that means it's not required. Then we come down here for the shoe size, and you can see it does allow half sizes, which is nice. And then we've got the slider. Okay, now I'm going to copy this, and we're going to paste that into Microsoft Edge. So Microsoft Edge is kind of similar in many respects. It does dates different, as you can see. And I actually really like how it does the dates. And then you just click the check mark and it puts it in there for you. Okay, now, one thing it doesn't do is it doesn't display the list arrows on shoe size. So you have to manually type that in. And then we've got our slider, and it actually tells you the values as you're sliding, which is also useful. Okay, so there are some differences in how these browsers are handling this. And we'll look at Firefox. And it is a good idea, you know, if you're doing this on the job, that you check all of the major browsers, because there may be some unintended effects that you don't want in the form. Okay, so here, there's nothing, okay? Other than the initial tip, it's not really showing them anything. That's why we have this over on the left. So if it's not helping them out, at least they know how to key this in. Another thing you will notice is that it's not, well, it didn't do it here, but it is showing us a tip. So at least it's showing us, you know, when we need to get things keyed in. Now it does have the spin arrows, which is nice. No tip on the slider. Okay, but that gives you kind of a flavor of how this works in 3 of the different browsers. And then we'll come back in here. For this next little section, which is the billing address, this is where we're using the text area box, and we've kind of overridden the width and the height. We have our zip code, and we're just saying it's text, that is required. Then we have a data list, which is actually kind of a nice way to do a drop-down list, because you actually don't really have to have a label with this. It just requires the value, and whatever you enter in value is actually what gets displayed. In a normal select, you have to have a value, plus you have to basically key the same thing in between the opening and the closing options. With a data list, you don't have to. So that's actually pretty awesome. So with the data list, you do need an input element, but you do not put the type in input. If you put a type in input, your list will not work. So you kind of omit type, and then you need to have list equal followed by a name. And that name has to be the ID in the data list tag. So they have to match. That is the most important thing. All the other attributes that you have in input are kind of optional. List is not. You need to have that. Okay, so here's the data list showing the different countries. And we'll take a look at how that looks. So here's our billing address section. Okay, so then we'll put in a zip code. And I'm going to select my country. And we'll copy that because I don't like to type. Come over here, put in the address. And you can see I actually clicked in it once, and then I had to click over on the right to get this list. So probably not the ideal as far as the data list goes. I mean, you can get the list, but it does take a little bit of effort. And if there's something there, we actually need to get rid of it and click more on the right-hand side. And then let's scroll down here. And then the country works fairly well here. Okay, and this was Microsoft Edge. So you will notice a variance in all of the different browsers. Let's take a look at that third section. So third section is the credit card details. Obviously, you would want a very secure encryption if you were actually going to implement this at a site. We do not have secure encryption. So obviously we'll be entering fake data. And so we have the different cards, and those are radio buttons because they can only select one. So radio is what you want to use for that. And then we've got a text box for the name, the card number, the security code, and the expiration date. For the security code, we know that has to be a number. We know that it's 3 digits. So we are using the pattern attribute. And these various areas, most of them are required. I think we have all of them required. And then at the very bottom, we have a submit and a reset button. So let's take a look at those. And let's see what happens. If I submit without the security code. Okay, so it's making me fill it in. Chrome is not even letting me key in letters. So it is forcing me to key in numbers. But it did accept a single number. Okay, just so you know, it's not really enforcing 3. Okay, so let's go over here. We'll do something similar. Let's submit here. Okay, so it's saying enter a number. That's actually kind of a nice message. Telling us to enter a number there. Let's submit 2. And unfortunately for the expiration date, it's really not helping us with the formatting at all. So let's submit. Now, if it's really reading the pattern, it's going to come back and tell us we need to enter 1 more. It was ensuring that we have numbers, but it's not ensuring that we have 3. Might be a universal issue. Let's submit here and see what it does. Okay, so it says this is a required field. Let's just try 1 digit. Yep, it's going to take 1 because now it's moved on to the expiration. Yep. So they all required a number because of the pattern, but they did not check the number of digits. So as I said, it's not really perfected yet in these browsers, but it is worth learning because in what happens over time is features get added in. Okay, so that is your second form. Now the next one that you're going to do is basically a mail to, and all you have to do is modify the form tag to make it a mail to. So instead of submitting to the script, you're going to submit it to email. And the next video shows you more about that.